that, before the pyramids rose from the desert to lands Upper and Lower Egypt, were joined into one kingdom. That single act set the stage for 3,000 years of civilization. But who was responsible for this unification, and how did they pull it off? And what came next? Welcome to my channel. It's me, and this is Ancient Egypt, Part 1, Before the Pyramids. Let's take a journey back to the beginning. Around c. 3100 BCE, two regions along the Nile River, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north, had developed their own distinct cultures, languages, and political organizations. The only thing that connected them was the river itself. Then everything changed. A leader known in tradition as Nama or Menes, depending on which Egyptian source you consult, conquered the north and joined the two lands together. He is usually depicted wearing the crown of Upper Egypt, the red crown with a white stripe, but also holding the crook and flail, symbols of Lower Egypt. In art, he's often shown wearing a nes, a kind of close-fitting skull cap associated with Lower Egypt, but also sporting a false beard, a symbol of kingship. In other words, he's wearing a kind of cultural fusion fashion statement that says, "I'm the guy," as the first king of a unified Egypt. His accomplishments are often forgotten because Egyptian tradition began its historical reckoning from the unification. The traditional date of Nama's unification is around 3100 BCE, which means that King George II of England took the throne 3 millennia ago. It doesn't seem possible, does it? But it's true. Anyway, thanks to the unification, all the people living along the Nile were now subjects of the same royal court, bound together under a single religious ideology, with a single administrative structure. And that structure, as we mentioned, was a big deal because it allowed Egypt to manage its land, labor, and grain at an unprecedented scale. The Nile River flooded every year, depositing nutrient-rich silt on the floodplain, which made it one of the most productive regions in the ancient world. As a result, villages grew into towns and eventually cities. Towns required administrators to manage waterworks. They also had specialized craftsmen like potters and weavers and even doctors. And so the Egyptian state grew more complex. Now, this complexity is one of the reasons why Nama is rarely credited with much beyond starting the whole thing. His successors improved upon his achievements, and they did so in a big way. His immediate successor, King Aha, established the first capital city, Memphis, in the north, and by the end of the Second Dynasty, kings ruled over some 40 different nomes or districts. By the time of the Third Dynasty, nomarchs or governors administered each nome, collecting taxes and organizing the building projects and public works. The king, who would later be called the pharaoh, still held ultimate authority. He was considered a living god, the son of the sun god Ra. However, the pharaoh was increasingly reliant on the nomarchs to keep the empire running smoothly. In fact, it was during the Third Dynasty that Egypt entered its first golden age known as the Old Kingdom, or as the Egyptians called it the Age of the Pyramids, which is pretty fitting because that's what everyone thinks of when they think of Egypt. You can blame Hollywood for that one. Anyway, during the Old Kingdom, which lasted from around 2686 to 2181 BCE, Egypt enjoyed another agricultural revolution, producing food surpluses that enabled monumental building projects and standing institutions like the pyramids. The king's power was symbolized by these pyramids, massive stone tombs that dwarfed anything that had come before. The first true pyramid was built by King Djoser of the 3rd dynasty. It was designed by the architect Imhotep and consisted of 6 stacked mastaba, which is a kind of flat-sided tomb. The structure looked a bit like a wedding cake, and it was built from mud brick, while the next pharaoh Snefru built his pyramid out of limestone. These true pyramids were more than just tombs. They were symbolic of the king's power, and they demonstrated the ability of the Egyptian state to organize massive building projects. This was especially true of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the 2nd pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. It was built from approximately 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing on average 2.5 tons. That makes the construction of the Great Pyramid one of the largest single building projects in human history. But the Old Kingdom didn't just see the rise of pyramids, it also saw the flourishing of Egyptian arts and culture. During the reign of the 5th dynasty, Egyptians developed hieroglyphic writing, which helped preserve many historical records of the period, including some of the earliest pieces of literature in human history. Unfortunately, the 6th dynasty would see the beginning of the end for the Old Kingdom. As the power of the nomarchs grew, the central authority of the pharaoh waned. Eventually, Egypt would dissolve into a civil war. So join us next time as we explore how Egypt got itself together and launched into the Middle Kingdom. What did you think? Did you learn anything new? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more information. See you next time.